Hello, if you're watching this, you've probably reached the end of the Medora Hornets Media Film Universe. So I have a few things that I just want to say about the series, just kind of a retrospective of sorts to give you all. I want to keep it short, but there's a few things I wanted to say and just, for memories down the road. In 2011, I released my first movie, Look to the Future. My friends and I decided to make this film for Red Ribbon Week, which is an anti-drug use event that goes on in schools throughout the United States every year. We wanted to make something that was somewhat comical, but fit the theme. Most anti-drug PSAs that we had seen were usually pretty cringy. They were not that good at that time, so we wanted to make one that kind of made fun of that, but still had a positive message. The movie itself, it obviously, if you've watched it, it's not great. There was a lot of things that we did not do particularly well. None of us knew exactly what we were doing. But it is funny, it's very silly, and it's a great memory. It's something I like to look back at every few years. The people who were in the film with me have told me that they do the same. So that's the most important thing with that movie. So for several years, I didn't create any more films, especially throughout my college years after I graduated from high school. I had ideas for doing more, and I even considered doing sequels to Look to the Future. Never thought that they would actually get made, though, for any reason. I started teaching at Medora School in 2016 as an aide, and I did Spanish. So I assigned a Spanish project to my students. I wanted them to make like a fake movie trailer or commercial and try to do it in Spanish. Well, what ended up coming from that is The Van. The Van is incredibly goofy. It's probably one of the silliest films that we made, and it has some of the worst Spanish that you will ever see. But it was very cute. The kids put a lot of effort into it, and they came to me for help with editing. And it really got me excited about filmmaking again, seeing students get so into it. And so for that reason, I started investing in getting equipment and getting software so I could get back into video editing and maybe take on more ambitious projects in the future. So The Van itself, maybe not the greatest film in the world, but it served a very important purpose of getting me back into filmmaking. In 2018, I started working for Blue River Services, well, the 2017-18 school year. I started working for Blue River Services, the after-school program at Medora. After a while, I became good friends with some of the people that worked there. Angie Arthur, Kelly Barker, became good friends with them. And I pitched the idea to them of having some of our after-school students put together a movie as something like a club. And they really liked the idea. I showed them the previous stuff they'd made, and they liked the idea of it. So we took a lot of inspiration from just running jokes we had from within the classroom. Kelly, for example, always liked to threaten that she was going to beat kids with a wet noodle if they did something inappropriate. She would just kind of throw that out there. So that kind of got the gears turned. I was like, man, maybe we can actually make that into the movie. We also based it on some events that were a little more current to the time, such as Harambe's death, even though when we made the incident report, this was still like 2 years after that, and most of the world had already moved on, so I don't know. It was a recurring joke with my students, and so I thought that it would be great to actually incorporate it into the film. The incident report, when we started making it, the kids in the after-school program were really excited about it. They could not decide exactly what they wanted to do with the film. They said that they wanted to do a parody of something like Star Wars or something like The Office. And I told them, why not both? Let's kind of mix those two things together. So that's why you've got like the weird deadpan looking at the camera cutaways, and then you have like a lightsaber fight in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the movie. So it was fun. It was difficult at times coordinating everything, and it was my first experience making what I would consider to be a bigger film, but it was very cute, and I would consider it to be a good success. After we successfully made the incident report, I began to revisit the idea that I had of making a sequel to Look to the Future. I had written some, spec scripts for it whenever I was in college, but none of them were particularly good, and they didn't work with the cast that we had. So I decided to modify it and kind of write it as a sequel to the incident report. Originally, I intended for this to kind of be the last movie that I did. I was pretty exhausted after having edited the incident report, and I didn't want to take on too many more film projects at that time. So one of my friends, Chase Hurley, who was a part of the original Look to the Future, he was getting ready to join the Air Force at that time, so he was getting ready to leave Indiana and go to basic training. So I knew I had a limited amount of time to get this movie put together before he left. So I made the movie as kind of a tribute to him and our friendship. So I wanted it to be a farewell present of sorts. After I got the script together, we filmed the entire movie over the course of about one weekend. It was hectic. There's a lot of things with the movie I wish we had been able to do better, in hindsight, obviously, but it still remains one of the most fun and incredible memories in filmmaking that I've ever experienced. The last incident. I've always had conflicting feelings about that film. Initially, I did not want to make it. I was kind of pressured by some of my coworkers to actually make that film. It's sloppy. It doesn't really resemble the original script that it was made from, but in hindsight, I am glad that we made the movie because it did expand the universe of the films and gave the potential for quite a few more, which I think were much better. The thing with it is very funny. It's off the wall. I have had some students who have told me that they absolutely love this one and it's their favorite one, so I'm glad that it exists. The Angelo Artois character played by Angie Arthur, I have to give her props for her dedication to making that character into something that was really funny. Absolutely loved having Angelo Artois in these films. So yeah, Medora Apocalypse, without a doubt, is my favorite of the Medora films, at least the way the final film turned out. It's not perfect, it's got a lot of editing errors, just like the other ones, a lot of filming errors, but it was incredibly ambitious, it was really funny, and it was meant to serve as a satisfying conclusion for the entire series. It was meant to give a satisfying conclusion to the arcs of all the characters and somewhat undo some of the terrible things that had happened to them in past films. This one was intended to be a definitive end. I did not originally intend to make more beyond Medora Apocalypse, but this movie, it took about 2 months to make, to film everything. It took about another month to completely edit it. So at the time, it was a very massive undertaking. I'm very proud of the way it turned out. Did I about have a mental breakdown along the way in this film? Absolutely. At one point, I actually about quit my job with the after-school program because I got so frustrated with the project. Fortunately, I stuck it out. Fortunately, my coworkers, encouraged me, helped me stick it out. We finished it, and I'm really happy with the way that movie turned out. I'll probably never make another one quite like that one again. The Haunted Halls of Medora High School. My God, did this one cause me some grief. This movie, man, it was very ambitious. It was created primarily by students. When I first started teaching computer science at Medora, I had a class called Interactive Media, which was all about making interactive games, interactive websites, and movies. So we decided to make another film. I had the unique situation. I came back to Medora School, and a lot of the students that I had worked with previously, either in the after-school program or when I did the Spanish, were still here. So I had an opportunity and knew that if I was going to make any more films in the Medora series, I needed to do it before those respective kids graduated. So I credit Jalen Spence a lot for helping with this film. He definitely served as a big inspiration, and he wrote a significant portion of the script. His classmates helped create the full outline for the movie, and so it's really my first interactive media project. That said, it did not go well. The 2020-21 school year, when I started, obviously that was not a very smooth school year. We had only gotten into like the first or second day of shooting when COVID-19 lockdowns started to be enforced again at the school, and we ended up transitioning over to what was called hybrid scheduling. So like half the students would be at the school at a time. So we could never have all of our students together to film at the same time. That's very problematic if you're making a movie. So we ended up shooting probably 90% of this film in front of a green screen, which at that point I did not have a ton of experience playing around with. Knew how it worked, but I hadn't really used them a lot in my films. And they're not difficult to use, but it does take a little bit of tweaking to make things look nice. So it takes a lot more work than just editing, basic shots together. I underestimated the project a lot. Some of the shots just did not turn out right. We ended up doing so many reshoots, and it took 2 full years before I got to the point where I thought that the movie was ready to actually be edited together and released. So we finished shooting it in the spring of 2022. One of my later interactive media classes came in. I called them the cleanup crew because they fixed so many of the things that were wrong with that movie. And then that fall, mostly in September and October, I ended up putting the film together and ended up premiering in November of 2022, 2 years after we originally planned. Obviously, I have mixed feelings about the Haunted Halls, but I am happy with the way that the movie turned out. The fact that it's half as coherent and funny as it is, and honestly, it ended up being one of the truest ones to the original script that we actually ended up adapting. So I'm really happy with the Haunted Halls. I love the twist ending at the end of it, and I think that is what made me want to stick that project out rather than scrapping it. I thought the script and the story that the kids came up with was too good to just toss away. Of course, the Medora film series is not just comprised of the main films. There are several short films that I consider to be a part of it as well. So among them you have Calhoulahan, which was made by Jalen Spence and Jackson Combs, primarily as part of Jalen Spence's interactive media class. They created most of this film together. Jalen wrote it, they both acted and filmed it, and then Jalen edited most of it. So I was just there more of it as an advisory role, but I really appreciate what he did. And also it's a Western, which is something I had not had a chance to tackle in any of my films before, so it's nice to add a Western into the ranks of the Medora films. The next one was Legend in the Making. Legend in the Making is like a boxing parody movie. It kind of parodies the story beats of Rocky a little bit. It is very cute. My Cleanup Crew interactive media group made that film. They adapted it from a script, oddly enough, that a bunch of 8th graders had written. The 8th graders wrote it. They did not particularly adapt the film well, but I really liked the script that they created. So I have my interactive media kids revise it, and we end up turning it into a full movie. The acting in it is kind of hit or miss. Obviously, that's one thing a lot of people have told me when they've watched it, but you gotta realize these kids were not professionals. It was the first time they made a movie. But I think the technical aspects, especially the fight at the end and just how funny it is, make up for a lot with the movie. It's got a lot of heart, and pun intended, and it's very cute. The third major short film that we did is a Medora Hornets mystery, which my coworker Ruben Merritt volunteered to get murdered at the beginning of it, and then had a detective story where the kids tried to solve his murder. I really enjoyed shooting this film. I think as far as editing goes, it's one of the smoother films that we have had. It's very cute. It ended up being featured in the Tribune, which was awesome, so it's nice to get a little bit of exposure for our computer science and media program at Medora School, so I was excited about that. But it was made almost entirely by 7th graders. I did have to wrap up some of the parts of editing just due to time conflicts, but man, they did a fantastic job. I think that movie turned out great. That brings us to the final entry of the series, Look to the Future, An Unfinished Legacy. It was very important for me, especially after how rough things had been with the Haunted Halls. I wanted to end the series on a note that I felt better about, and also I wanted to give good closure to the Archimedes Ignomortis character, because I felt like he was the only character that didn't really get satisfying closure in Medora Apocalypse, whereas most of the other characters did. So that's the main reason that this film ended up existing. Originally, I had plans for a sweeping, epic gothic fantasy that was going to wrap the series. It was going to be very professional. We were going to have a lot of people involved in it. And after reading it, realizing it was going to be a very difficult undertaking, that wasn't the reason we ended up scrapping it. It was because it just did not feel like it fit with the rest of the series. It would have probably worked better as a standalone film. So I decided I wanted to go back to the drawing board, take some of the story beat ideas that I had, and I tried to create something that felt like it was true to the series. And personally, I think we succeeded. I cannot think of a better way to end the series than the way that we did. And in many ways, I'm not going to spoil it if you haven't seen this one yet, but it kind of brings the series full circle back to what really got all of our filmmaking started. So I was really excited about that. Also, I had to give it a Look to the Future title because that's my first movie, so I wanted to do my last as well to be part of that Look to the Future sub-series. So I'm really happy with this film. I'm really thankful to Griffin, Jalen, and Gwynny for helping me create it. You guys were awesome. Thank you guys for taking some time out of your summer to help me get that film done. I want to conclude this short retrospective just by saying thanks to everyone who has taken part in making these Medora films what they are. Coworkers, friends, family, students, former students. I've had a lot of people who have given parts, big and small, to making these movies a success. Couldn't have done it without all of you guys, and I thank you so much. I know that these movies are not amazing. I'm not oblivious to that fact. I hope people realize that. But I enjoy them a lot. I get such a great laugh going back and looking at these things, and I think that they are great memories. after graduating and coming back years later and looking at Look to the Future, I realized that it had just kind of preserved like a special moment in time for me, and looking back at it, it just felt awesome. I wanted to provide that experience to my own students, and I'm glad that I have. I've already had kids that have graduated and come back and told me that being a part of these movies was one of the most fun things that they did in high school. So I hope over the years that that's what these movies become. I hope they become just great memories to look back on and laugh, and hopefully meme them to death like down the road, I hope. So once again, thank you all for being a part of Medora series and helping me fulfill my childhood dream that I had of making movies. Thank you, and thanks for watching.